Stand by SOT1.
Standing.
10 seconds. Ready, roll in. Ready, SOT1.
Ready.
In 4, 3, 2, 1. Roll in.
From legendary Uncle Studios in beautiful Southern California, welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters, the central location for you employees, you employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. And now, here's this week's edition of Work Comp Matters. It's March 7th, 12 noon straight up. Welcome to another edition of Work Comp Matters. We are sponsored by mancavepodcasting.com. If you want to do your own podcast, all you have to do is talk. The content is completely yours. 818-357-4120. mancavepodcasting.com will produce, direct, manage, stream live your podcast with your content on the air and then put it into the cloud forever. And if you don't have the coin, that's okay. We've got almost 700 podcasts. They're completely free, no obligation, available to you 24/7. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Steve Appel. I'm joined by the madman across the water, the socialist voice of reason, out in Munich, Germany, Mr. John Scalia. Stories in the news today that John and I believe are of interest to you, California employees, employers, and of course, we haven't forgotten about you damn independent contractors. State agency had mask raids at preschools. The complaint alleges. From the Los Angeles Times, USC lifts masks mandates from most campus facilities. From the Bay Area News Group, some Bay Area colleges keep COVID-19 mask mandates. From CAP Radio, geography, politics, key factors in whether California districts will still require masking. From the Los Angeles Daily News, the Los Angeles Unified School District. As Los Angeles County's COVID unmasking advances, the hard part remains for the district, building a consensus. From the Voice of Orange County, Capistrano, Unified School Board member, resigns, citing harassment after school mask debates. From the Los Angeles Times, Los Angeles coronavirus cases continue to decline, but hot spots remain. And from the Los Angeles Chronicle, for people who never got COVID, what are the odds they never will? And those stories plus more that both John, myself, believe are of interest to you employees, employers, and independent contractors. But John has the first story, and I want to talk about this first story really quickly. We talk about fines. We talk about penalties. We talk about treble damages, and John can talk more about that because he's the only attorney on the show. I'm not an attorney. I never went to law school. That being said, when we talk about fines and damages, sometimes it's $55. Sometimes it's $550. Sometimes it's $5,500. Sometimes it's $55,000. Sometimes it's $555,000. Sometimes it's $5.5 million. But the story that John has involves a $55 million fine. That's right, $55 million. And we're going to go to John Scalia in Munich, Germany, to give us our first story of the day on Work Comp Matters regarding a $55 million fine. John.
This is from the LA Times. LA County Health Plan hit with huge fines for delays in treating poor patients. A cancer patient enrolled in a health insurance plan serving LA County's poorest and most vulnerable residents was left untreated as their health rapidly deteriorated, according to state regulators. Another enrollee was left suffering extreme pain for weeks while waiting for treatment. Treatment for a third patient diagnosed with lymphoma and given less than a year to live was delayed for more than 2 months. That patient left the plan, LA Care, for other insurance in a desperate attempt to save their life. All 3 cases stem from deep-rooted failures that continue to threaten the health of patients whom LA Care is entrusted to serve, according to state health regulators. On Friday, the state announced $55 million in fines against the publicly operated health plan that insures more than 2 million Medi-Cal patients and other low-income recipients. It is by far the largest such penalty in state history, outstripping the previous record of $10 million. The historic fines follow a state investigation sparked by a September 2020 Times article that found that patients in LA County run hospitals and clinics, many of whom are covered by LA Care, faced agonizing, sometimes deadly delays to see specialists. I have 2 comments on the article immediately. One is, you notice that the investigation was sparked by an article in the LA Times. So the question that one has to ask is, who's watching the store? I mean, is the public supposed to depend on the LA Times to do the job of public officials? You know, they shouldn't, but apparently they are. And that's just wrong. I mean, you know, there's nothing in the article, it's a long article, it went on and on, about why that should be the case or why it shouldn't be the case, more accurately. But there should be a discussion of that, because that's just simply wrong. The second thing I noticed in here, because it hit a personal note, was that there was a guy who needed colonoscopy, and this healthcare plan delayed it for 3 years and he died. You know, it's just ridiculous. I live in a country where we have socialized medicine. I'm not in it, okay? If I lived in Italy, I would be covered by the Italian health plan. But I live in Germany and I'm not covered by the German socialized medical plan. So I go privately to doctors. Well, just today, online, without any problems, I booked an appointment for a colonoscopy. Okay. I mean, it was that simple. They didn't ask me, do you have, you know, they said I didn't have insurance. Doesn't matter. You know, I will go in there and they will eventually send me a bill. But, you know, it's ridiculous that when somebody's depending on a publicly funded operation like this, that these sorts of things are happening. It's even more outrageous that there's no public oversight, apparently. What do you think, Steve?
John, I was going to ask you, it seems to me that this fine will be appealed. And I wanted to ask you, what jurisdiction does the appeal fall under, if you know?
Well, I don't know offhand, but I would suspect that there's probably an administrative level of appeal that may be available to them. And then after that, they would have to go to Superior Court. But I'm not really sure what grounds they would have for taking an appeal or who they would get to do it for them. I mean, if they're a publicly financed insurance company or insurer, more accurately, what, the public's going to pay to fight off a fine that this public entity did, you know, and got imposed on it because they were negligent in their duty? I mean, that seems outrageous too.
Yeah, and I seriously doubt that they're going to just simply, the CEO, the CFO is going to write a check for $55 million. I would suspect, you know, they're going to call up and say, hey, can we make payments or whatever? You know what I mean? I doubt a $55 million check is coming in the mail anytime soon.
Well, yeah. And again, the other question is, I mean, who's going to pay it anyway? I mean, if this is a publicly financed health provider, where does the 55 million come from? I mean, you know, are they finding themselves? I mean, I don't get that at all. There's no explanation in the article where this money allegedly is going to come from, or why this agency would even have an extra $55 million to pay.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. Our next news story comes from the Los Angeles Times. The University of Southern California today will lift its indoor masking requirements for most campus facilities, officials announced. Masks will still be required at healthcare facilities and aboard public transportation, including USC shuttles, wrote Provost Charles Zukowski. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Senior Vice President of Administration David Wright in a message to students. Masks also might be requested if there is an outbreak on campus, they wrote. John.
The next one is another interesting story. It's got to do with education. State agency conducted mask raids, interviewed preschoolers alone. Yeah, preschoolers. Okay. Stephanie and Richard Rosado recently told their 4-year-old son about the importance of not talking to strangers. I think all of us had our parents tell us that at some point. Only days later, state regulators came to the child's preschool, isolated him in a room away from his teachers and friends, and asked him questions about masking. His parents and many others at the preschool were furious. Regulators questioned the Rosado son the kid's 4 years old, folks, as part of an investigation into masking practices at Aspen Leaf Preschool, which operates 3 locations in San Diego. All 3 locations were simultaneously, quote, rated, words in quotes, as some parents have called it, in mid-January. Regulators separated the children and toddlers from familiar adults at each of the centers to ask questions about the preschool's masking policies. What's strange about that decision, among other things, parents and teachers say, is that Aspen Leaf officials had already been open with parents and regulators about their decision not to mask children. Regulators isolated and interviewed children aged 1 to 4, a step many parents say was inappropriate and unnecessary. Okay, that's ridiculous and it's obscene. First of all, they're state regulators. What are they doing questioning babies, essentially? Without their parents, without their teachers, it's absurd. And I would point out that if you want to question kids that age, you don't have regulators do it, or if you do, you have a child psychologist with them so that the kid feels comfortable. And you certainly should allow the parent in the room. It's just, this is outrageous. If any of this is true, it's totally outrageous.
And I was just going to say, John, I don't believe the story or parts of it. And the reason why is because you can't interrogate a 1-year-old. I thought it was blasphemous enough to interrogate a 4-year-old. What'd you give him his Miranda rights? How the heck can you interrogate a 1-year-old? Got to question that story. But moving on. No, go ahead.
The story, I've never seen the source of it's called The Voice of San Diego. It looks like it's from a law firm, actually. Yeah, it is.
It's from a law firm, not a journalist. What the hell is that doing in our newswire? A story from a law firm.
I think the journalist, I think anybody at the law firm wrote it, but the site is from Golper, Sullivan, Rivera, and Osuna, who are apparently a personal injury, workers' compensation, and medical malpractice firm in San Diego. And the article was on their site. So
yeah, of course it is.
You really think the parents could make this up? Come on. Really. I don't see how they could make it up.
It's bad enough interrogating a 4-year-old. Interrogating a 1-year-old, give me a break. From the Bay Area News Group, elementary, middle, and high school kids will soon be pulling off their masks, but young adults and 20-somethings will have to keep them on at some local universities and colleges. San Jose State and San Francisco State are among the several Bay Area colleges maintaining tougher face covering rules that the state and local counties. Those schools will require students to keep their masks on for at least the rest of the spring. You're dialed into Work Comp Matters. We're sponsored by mancavepodcasting.com. We've got about 700 podcasts in the tank, completely free. And if you want to do your own, 818-357-4120. We'll produce, manage, direct, stream it live into the cloud forever. Back to the stories that John and I believe are of interest to you, California employees, employers, and independent contractors.
Okay, this story is also from the Chronicle, I believe. For people who never got COVID, what are the odds they never will? Here's what experts say. As pandemic restrictions ease, some of the estimated 57% of Americans who have not yet contracted the virus may be wondering, if I start to live more like normal, going mask-free at restaurants, shopping, and even parties, what are the odds that I will never get COVID-19? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recently estimated, okay, it's all I can do to stop from making any comments there, but anyway, that around 43% of people in the US, or about 140 million people, have been infected with the coronavirus, which leaves almost 60% never having had it. The estimate counts each person once. So some of the more than 140 million Americans estimated to have had COVID may have been infected more than once. While during the Omicron surge, experts and public health officials cautioned that the highly contagious variant would infect many people, they don't think ending up with the virus is inevitable, at least in the near future. But they say it's going to require a fine balance as we transition into the endemic stage of COVID-19. It's not inevitable over the next year or two, said University of California, San Francisco Chair of Medicine, Dr. Bob Wachter, who also hasn't gotten COVID yet. He said when case rates are low, as they are now in the Bay Area, the roughly 60% of the population that has not had COVID is unlikely to get it, since they won't be exposed very much. So that's interesting. Neither Steve nor I has had COVID. We're both vaccinated, of course. But neither one of us has had COVID. And so it actually is interesting to wonder whether or not we will. Now, back in Munich, just last week, I was at a party, well, not a party, well, you know, beer drinking and karaoke in a bar. I guess that's sort of a party. And we were, of course, all unmasked. I mean, you know, you had to be vaccinated to get in, but nobody was wearing a mask. And we were milling around talking to each other for a couple hours, maybe even longer. So in some sense, life is getting back to what it used to be like. And I'm not particularly concerned personally about getting COVID anymore. I'm triple vaccinated. Steve has been vaccinated. And I have two sons, one of whom is fully vaccinated, the other of whom wouldn't get the vaccine. And they're both alive and kicking and doing fine. So there.
I couldn't, John, I couldn't help myself. Sorry for your son who has never been vaccinated. Yes, it's absolutely true. I have never been diagnosed with COVID. However, I've said many times that in November, December of 2019, I came down with, at that time was thought was a very bad case of the flu. Again, November, December of 2019, I was in bed for 3 days, knocked out. And the following 2 weeks, I was hacking up phlegm. I just attributed it to a very bad case of the flu. And because I've had a horrible tobacco habit for decades, I thought it was the reminiscence of that. My personal opinion, that was the starting of COVID because, of course, Friday the 13th, March 13 was the national, that's when at that time President Trump said we have a national health concern. But a lot of my friends, a lot of my family, a lot of people that I know also were knocked out around the end of 2019, which at that time was considered a very bad case of the flu. Personally, and again, no analytics, no statistics, no empirical evidence to prove it, but I believe that that was my initial case of COVID-19. But John is 100% correct. I've never been diagnosed with COVID-19. And of course, I am fully vaccinated. Yes.
Yeah. So, I think it's the chances of my getting it are probably pretty low now. And all during the pandemic, I was active. I kept, except for the time I injured my knee and needed sutures, I kept running. I ran this morning. I was skiing last week.
And you're still not wearing knee pads or gloves when you run, per my recommendation, correct?
I'm wearing running gloves, which are very
Oh, there
thin.
you go. There you go.
To protect you in any way. They're designed to keep you warm. And of course, the reason I got them is because 30 years ago when I was skiing, my gloves fell apart and it was snowing. And like an idiot, I kept skiing. And when I came into the restroom, because my hands were cold, I took my gloves off and my hands were both blue. I mean, literally blue. So I knew I had frostbite. And ever since then, if you read about the effects of frostbite destroys some of the nerve endings in your fingertips and whatever. And so you're going to be, and I have been for the last 30 years thereabouts, extremely sensitive to cold. So my hands get cold, even when it's not cold out, even when it's just pleasant, it gets to be like in Fahrenheit, if it gets to be 65 degrees, my hands will start getting a little cold. I mean, nothing important, but I know it's the effects of the frostbite. So that's why I got the running gloves. Yeah. But no, my knees don't have any protection.
From the voice of OC, Capistrano Unified School District Trustee Pamela Brownstein abruptly resigned from her seat Thursday of last week, saying that the policies against the mask mandate proposed by some of her former colleagues and harassment from parents harassing a school trustee. Imagine that. Harassment from parents pushed her to leave. Her resignation comes one day after efforts by 3 trustees to abandon mask mandates early failed at Wednesday's meeting, 10 days before the statewide mandate is set to expire. So we've got the statewide mandate, which is going to eliminate masking requirements. And apparently this trustee resigned because she did not agree with what everybody thought. Oh, my goodness. Well, John, as the old saying goes, if you can't stand the heat, get the hell out of the damn kitchen.
Well, I certainly agree with that. And you had many years to be familiar with my personality and know that I rarely if ever back away from a fight. However, I think it's a sad comment on the fact that Americans no longer talk to each other just because they're on opposite sides of an issue. And that's really unfortunate. It's just the breakdown of rational intercourse. And it should never. Yeah. I see you laughing there.
Rational intercourse. Go ahead, John.
It should never happen. I mean, the ability to communicate should persist regardless of how much you disagree. And unless somebody gets really personal and tells you that you can take a flying leap at a rolling donut, this should never come down to that. So that's unfortunate. However, now I have an article that actually has to do with animals and not humans. Imagine that, and the problems that they're having with a disease. Contagious. This is from it's from the Orange County Register. Contagious equine virus removes horses from Swallows Day Parade. Other events. I always wonder why they keep using the word equine. I mean, it comes from the Latin equus for horse, but come on, just use horse. Anyway, the annual Swallows Day Parade in San Juan Capistrano. By the way, the annual Swallows Day Parade is the day on which the swallows come back to San Juan Capistrano from where they were wintering in Mexico. Will go on without horses this year, as are many events in the region because of a contagious equine virus that's been reported throughout California, including in Orange County. In a letter to equestrian event organizers on Thursday, March 3, state veterinarian Dr. Annette Jones cautioned that equine herpes virus myeloencephalopathy, or EHM, much easier to say, had been found in multiple horses in several counties in California, and warned if not contained, the disease caused by a contagious virus can have significant consequences to the horse industry, infecting thousands of horses due to the extensive mixing of horses at statewide, national, and international horse events. So there you go. Humans are not the only ones that have problems with epidemics. Our horse companions are also having it. And,
horses have feelings too. Yes, I get it completely. From the San Francisco Chronicle, COVID cases and hospitalizations have plummeted in the Bay Area since the peak of the Omicron surge 6 weeks ago, but it will probably be another 4 to 6 weeks before they bottom out, hopefully at a level that reflects minimal spread of the coronavirus in the community. Health experts say daily cases are less than 1/10 of what was being reported in early January, and hospitalizations are down about 70% from the peak. COVID deaths, a lagging and somewhat more erratic metric because of reporting issues, appear to have peaked recently at about 30 to 35 a day for the region, though it's too soon to say for sure they've stopped rising. I think we're clearly starting to bottom out. I think we're clearly entering the new normal. We are not done with COVID. It's clearly still here, but there's no question in my mind we have already started the new normal. John.
Yeah, in Europe, I think Vladimir Putin and his nuclear weapons are a bigger threat right now than any pandemic. The next article is from something called EP Source, and it's Will a Universal Screening Test for Dyslexia Mislabel California's English Learners? Now I should point out that, basically we were all English learners because we all took classes called English, but obviously this refers to kids who are learning English as a second language. In the push to screen all California students for dyslexia, some worry English learners will be mislabeled, making it harder for them to become fluent in the language. Governor Gavin Newsom has set aside millions over the past 2 years for dyslexia research at UC San Francisco to create screening tests in multiple languages that would signal if a child is at risk for dyslexia. A bill in the state legislature would require all kindergartners, first graders, and second graders to be screened for dyslexia starting in 2022-2023 school year. But the idea of a universal dyslexia screening test concerns some teachers and researchers who advocate for English learners. They say tests must be carefully designed to avoid misdiagnosing students who are learning English. So, I have some questions. I believe this is personal for Gavin Newsom because I think he was dyslexic. So to some extent, this has got a personal bias in it. Secondly, I'm confused. I thought dyslexia was the inability to read letters in the proper sequence or seeing them reversed. How difficult can it be to design a test to find out if a kid's seeing backwards? I'm sorry. Is this another case of scientists and researchers going berserko? It seems like it. I don't get it. And the other thing is, I agree. Who says that somebody at that age that you can validly test them? My daughter, who ended up getting into West Point, she was held back a year early on in her schooling because she was not getting it in terms of reading. And she was beyond the age at which most kids could read. She was reading, but not like she was supposed to. So I question everything about this. It seems like no offense, but the whole research project seems like quasi boondoggle. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, a good point. And that is our last story of the day. John, closing thoughts, burning desires before we close the show.
No, but if any of you, believe in good vibes or prayers or whatever you do to send into the universe or whatever may be out there listening, send it out there for Ukraine and for all the people who are getting bombed mercilessly and under missile attack.
And for those of you California employees, employers, and independent contractors, if you are interested more in that $55 million fine that LA Care has been assessed, contact your California assemblyman, contact your California state senator, contact the GAV, Governor Gavin Newsom. It's been a pleasure having you here for another edition of Work Comp Matters. Much thanks to Scott Walton of legendary Uncle Studio, John Scalia in Munich, Germany, all the good people back at work at mancavepodcasting.com. My name's Steve Appel. We'll see you again Friday, 12 noon live for another edition of Work Comp Matters. Bye.